Hey, Julien. Hey, Kiersten. Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Thank you.
Hey, man. How are you?
We're excited to be here.
Happy to have you guys here. You guys have an incredible story of debt elimination and wealth building that I know our audience can stand to learn quite a bit from. But before we start diving into your story, can you just say hello to everyone and let them know what you're all about?
Hey, everybody. I am Julien, one half of Rich and Regular, and this is my wife.
Hey, wife.
All right.
Well, I let it in so she can finish her sentence.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiersten. I am, I guess, a wife of Julien and the other half of Rich and Regular, or the rich half, as I like to say.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into it. You guys do have a great platform called Rich and Regular. Talk to us about the origin of the name and the concept behind it.
Why don't you start?
All right. Yeah, so the name really comes from this idea that rich people are removed from regular everyday life. And it's kind of our play on Millionaire Next Door. It's saying that, if the millionaire next door is this humble person who still drives a regular car and lives in a regular house, then there are a lot more rich people among us than we think. And so we created this blog to sort of normalize the conversation around not just getting rich, but actually staying rich. And it's really just our approach on how we manage money and family and love.
What made you think that you all could be rich? And for a lot of people, there aren't really a lot of examples that people connect to when it comes to rich. Rich feels like something that they obtain, not necessarily something that I can obtain. Where did the seed first come from for you all to even think that you all could become rich?
It's a great question. I would say, it probably happened a little differently for me than it did for her, because it wasn't just a matter of when I realized that I could be rich. It was genuinely a matter of me feeling like I could be whatever it is I put my mind to. I remember being a young boy in Brooklyn, New York City, playing basketball. And one day when I was playing with a friend and we were playing against someone else, he was telling someone to watch out for me because he's quick. And I never thought that I was quick before, but at that moment, he kind of confirmed it. And for some reason, it just kind of clicked in me that, wow, sometimes it's just that simple. You just need to say it out loud, believe it, and then you can be whatever you want to be. And so that might sound like a tiny little thing, but for me, it turned into me essentially wanting to be and working towards anything that I wanted to be, including rich.
So,
Yeah,
go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, for me, it was the moment that I realized that money can actually be a positive tool for change. I think before I just thought of money as that thing that you use to buy stuff, to pay for clothes and food and groceries. And I used all of my brain power at work to solve work problems. And so it was really just repositioning my brain problem to get more money to solve real problems. Not that the problems that I do at work aren't real, but there are real problems out there that money can be used as a tool to solve. And that really motivated me to say, this brain needs to be rich so that I can apply it to solving, real problems.
Now, how did you guys bring the vision together collectively as a unit, as a couple? Because a lot of times you have one person in the relationship who's all about saving money and the other is all about spending. I am the happy owner of the spending category in our relationship. And so there was a lot of things that we had to overcome and learn as a result of us getting married. I was completely bound in debt. Ty was completely debt free. And when we came together, we had a lot to figure out. And before we could even think about building wealth, we just had to figure out how to operate financially as a couple. So like, what type of money talks did you all have along the way? Like, did you all come into this thing like, hey, let's build wealth? Or was there some trial and error? How did you guys do this collectively?
No, I'm definitely team spender.
What up, Kiersten?
What up, teammate? Yeah, I came into the relationship fresh, fly, luxury car, sharp clothes, hair done. And Julien had a much more humble lifestyle, even though at the time we're making the same money. I just spent all of mine plus some. And our financial conversation started because we went on a vacation, and Julien found out that I put the whole vacation on a credit card, and he was completely offended and felt almost misled that I said I could go, but didn't have the money to go. And so our conversation actually started out of an ultimatum, which is our agreed word. I call it a threat, but it was this idea that, had he known that I was struggling financially and had all of this consumer debt, he wouldn't have gotten as serious, involved with me because of how important it is to him. And so that was sort of my wake up call to figure out, why is this thing so important? What is driving your desire to be alone rather than to be with someone who you like and may have, a little bit of debt on the side. So,
this is normally where I jump in and correct the story, but I'm gonna go ahead and let that one slide. It was well, I'll correct one thing. It wasn't an ultimatum, right? It was really me recognizing that this was important to me, and I knew what it took. I know how hard it is just to save $100. And so I knew the direction that I was going in, and I knew that we just were not on the same page, and that it would not work, to your point about how difficult it is just to get onto the same page. But if you never have that conversation and then you get married, it can be a really, really tough one. And so I knew the direction I was going in, and it was really just a matter of me saying, hey, this is a part of my life, this idea of building wealth, this idea of being debt free and having greater control over our lives. And so I essentially presented this opportunity to pursue, financial independence to her, and she hit it out the park, and we've been on the same page ever since.
So there's a couple listening right now who was there at that point where you were, and they don't know how to have that conversation. Or maybe they've attempted that conversation to no avail, and they're frustrated. They can't get on the same page. They want to get their finances in order. They want to head in the direction of debt freedom, in the direction of financial independence, but they are not seeing eye to eye financially. What advice you have?
I would say first, try and root the conversation in a fact and not a feeling. So there's always, whenever there's ongoing money issues, there's a level of emotion there, whether it's frustration or feeling not heard. But the good thing about money and numbers is that there's inherently a fact in it. So you can do something like pull up the debit, your checking account, and say, does having this much cash make you feel safe? Do you feel comfortable? I guess that is a feeling, but it started with a fact. You start with a fact, and then you can kind of go from there into how that makes you feel as one of the early, starting points of a conversation.
Oh, I agree 100%. The only other thing I would add to that is start with yourself, right? If it's a lot easier for you to have a breakthrough with your partner if you've kind of done the work yourself. You don't want to be in a position where you're asking someone to do something that you can't even really manage on your own. And so I would say start with yourself, get to a point where you feel at least comfortable and equipped to have a productive conversation. And then to Kiersten's point, stick to the facts and try to strip away all of the emotions, even though it's really difficult to do, but stick to the facts and the simple math. Multiplication, if we make this amount of money or we have this amount of debt and we start chopping away at this amount, this is where we'll be. Are you okay with that?
Now, you used a term not too long ago where you were talking about how you presented the idea to your wife about financial independence. Now, that is not, when you use that term, you're not using it as this big, vast phrase or like just a phrase with no meaning. There's a meaning behind when you say financial independence. It's a term that's gaining a lot more popularity in recent times as the message of it continues to become more and more to the forefront. It's a term that, if you've been around money, you may have heard, or if you've been around financial literacy and you've been trying to learn more about it, you may have heard the term, but there are a lot of people who don't know what financial independence or the phrase FIRE, the acronym FIRE means. So if you were talking to someone who had no idea and just thought you were just kind of throwing that phrase out there, how would you explain to them what financial independence means?
Yeah, so FIRE, we'll start with that as an acronym for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It's a really cool movement, predominantly of money nerds like Kiersten and I. But more importantly, the term financial independence or financial freedom is really this concept where your cost or your consumption, let's say on an annual basis, is essentially covered by passive income. And so you're not necessarily bound to work for money because your money or your portfolio or your other passive income streams essentially cover your expenses. And so that's essentially our goal. We are well on our way to achieving FI, as it is commonly referred to. But that's how I would explain it to anyone who'd never heard of the concept. And so another little way that I would say is, don't think about it as this is how much I spend and I've got to start a business or I've got to figure that thing out. Sometimes you've just got to plant enough little seeds that together create enough of a windfall that take a big chunk out of your consumption. And if you continue to do that, in addition to keeping your costs really, really low, you'll be able to achieve financial independence as well.
This is a term that is not discussed by large means or hardly any means at all within the African American community. Why do you think that is?
I think we have a history with money that is predicated by a lot of discrimination. We still face a lot of systemic bias. And so there's I won't say a hopefulness, but it does feel like there's a ceiling that a lot of Black people place in their minds, a limiting belief around who's able to be rich today, who's able to achieve financial independence. And so that was one of the reasons why we started the blog, is to say that you can be rich and still be a regular person. It's not that we acquired our wealth through inheritances or working on Wall Street. We're not doctors, we're not lawyers. Like, we go to a regular office every day, sit in a regular cubicle. And we've done this, just like Julien was saying, by taking small steps repeatedly over a larger amount of time. But it is still attainable for us. And I think, it's one of the reasons why we started the conversation, is because it's not discussed. And with our generation, I know a lot of Black people that make more money than me that could probably do the exact same thing, but just don't know that it's an option.
I would add one other thing is I believe the reason why it's not discussed in the African American community is because it's a consequence of our cultural identity, right? So Black people love Black people and Black people stuff. And we take everything with that. We take pride in it. And there's the good and the bad with that. One of those things is it is a cultural taboo to talk about money. And so if you want to be a part of that community and you want to just do things like your family or your social network has always done, you end up in a situation where you are essentially bound by the rules of that circle or of that culture. And so it takes a lot of courage to overcome that and to say, listen, I am still a part of this. I still am proud of that. But this little part here about the culture, I'm not messing with that. I need to break free because this is what I want to do. And so I certainly think that, when we talk about financial independence, or really just personal finance as a whole, one of the things that we try to do is to not double down on the tactics and the math, because it's not really about that. I don't think this is a matter of intelligence. I think it's predominantly a matter of overcoming cultural, social, and systemic issues. And once you can do that, everything else essentially is a matter of taking action.
Imagine a life where your money isn't strangled by mortgage payments. Imagine what you could do when you don't have to send them money that you work so hard for. Come get simple, powerful, and real solutions to eliminating monthly mortgage payments forever. America's #1 money couple presents Crush My Mortgage. In this exclusive course, you will be equipped with strategies to help you move faster toward the promised land of owning your house free and clear. Learn strategies to help you in the areas of payment acceleration, extra income generation, and wealth creation, all to help you crush your mortgage. Visit crushmymortgage.com and get started today. Join us on the path to power, freedom, and legacy. That's crushmymortgage.com.
Okay, speaking of action, let's go back to the starting line. And you just presented the concept to your wife and she's on board, what did you all do in the beginning? What should the people listening who want to become rich and regular do to start the journey?
Yeah, for me, it was a matter of debt payoff was my first step. I had consumer credit cards that had interest rates in the 30% range. And so while I was making the minimum payment, the balance wasn't going down on any of them. So I needed to find ways to make a bigger payment. So I basically adopted the Snowball Method, which is paying down, your largest balance cards first. I think I took the approach of paying down the cards with the highest interest rates first, but same logic. I went on a cash-only diet. I did the Dave Ramsey plan where I had the envelope system and cut up the credit cards altogether. But I think the biggest factor that really allowed me to pay down my debt quicker was moving out of my fancy Midtown apartment. So I downsized to an apartment in the suburbs that was about the size of a closet and stayed there for a year and a half, cut my rent in half and, sacrificed so that I could throw more money at this debt. And once I saw that, I was giving myself a raise every month by every time I eliminated a credit card, it became addictive to me in a good way, where I just kept pursuing it. And so once the debt was gone, we started moving on to investments and mortgages and, all the other fun stuff that you can do with your money when you don't have debt.
No, I would just say, on the other side of that coin, and she mentioned it, for us, it was about, making other big moves and essentially collecting assets. And so while she was paying down debt, I was essentially trying to save up to buy our first rental investment property. And so we did that, I want to say, in 2014. It was not pretty, but we got through it. And today it is certainly reaping rewards. And so we're proud of that. The second thing was we paid off our mortgage. I know you guys just did that, so congratulations. Yes. But we paid off our mortgage in the house that we're in. And the goal is to convert this property into our second rental property and then use the proceeds from these two to essentially subsidize our new mortgage. We're moving into a new home in about 3 weeks, which we're really excited about. But it feels good to know that while we do have a mortgage on it, we're essentially only paying about a third of it because others are going to be paying for it in our rental properties.
All right, so we're going to have to unpack all of this. We're going to have to unpack all of this for the people. But I want to back up just briefly because, Kiersten, I don't think that the process was as easy as you just made it sound like. Yep, I just figured it out one day and boom, paid off my credit cards. I'm reminded of a picture that I saw on your Instagram page, I don't know, weeks back. And I believe, and correct me where I'm wrong, but I believe it was a picture, a split picture of you all's like first car when y'all met. And one was like a really old car and one was like this fancy black something, if I remember correctly. So clearly there was a different mindset in the beginning in regards to how money should be spent. So did you go through some withdrawal? Because Kiersten, you had to change everything between the ears when it came to interacting with money. So there are some people who are really trying to make that switch and are having a really tough time. How come you were successful at it?
I won't say that I had 100% success rate. There were definitely months where I struggled, but it boiled down to a pen and paper. I went super old school. And this was probably before a lot of the premier apps that people are using now were available. But paper and pen just kind of signaled a commitment to me that apps and technology didn't. And so every month, the first of the month, I would write down where my money was going to go. And the day it hit my paycheck, I would physically go into my account and move the money and check it off of my list. And then at the end of that month, I would write myself a letter about where I was successful, where I failed. I kept receipts. And I still have this journal to this day. It's all tattered and it's got a bunch of random numbers in it. But it's a reminder of the commitments that I made to myself in writing to make sure that I could follow through. But it was absolutely tough. I had to address a lot of things about myself around what was driving me to spend money I didn't have. Why was I so keen on impressing people with the exterior, things that surround me buying that car, buying a luxury car at 23, however old I was when I got it, was probably the worst financial decision I've ever made, because it saddled me with this giant car note every month. And I wasn't making that much money.
It looked nice though.
It did. It was cute, and it still is. I still drive it, but it looked nice. But it caused a whirlwind of consumer debt after that. Like, it was a bad decision. Although it is a very cute car, still.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You all paid off like over $200,000 worth of debt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So break that down for us. Like, what type of debt was this here and there to combine, and how long did it take for that?
I want to say it took about 5 years, but that's a combination of credit card debt, tax debt, 2 car notes, student loans, and a mortgage on the house that we're in, inclusive of credit card debt that we use to renovate the home that we're in.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go back and unpack the strategy that you all have taken as far as where you will live. I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what you all did, because it sounds like you all are house hacking.
Yes.
I believe that's the term. See, I've been reading on my financial independence stuff. I've been trying to learn all the little phrases and whatnot. So take your time and unpack the strategy that you all have taken up to this point and where you're projecting to go, because I believe you said that somebody had an apartment, plus you all had a rental, plus you're in another rental. So kind of walk us through that from beginning till today.
Yeah. So let me start with defining house hacking the way that the F.I.R.E community traditionally defines it. It's when someone buys a home that has multiple bedrooms, they take on roommates, and between the rent that they charge their roommates, the mortgage is paid for, essentially. So you're living in a house that you're not necessarily paying for. For us, that's a bit of an impractical solution because we're married with a small child, and so roommates at this stage in life really isn't practical. And so our version of house hacking is to use we have separate rental properties, and we use the income from those rental properties to pay our primary mortgage. You want to talk through the timeline of how?
I'm impressed. I've never heard the term house hacking before.
Oh, really?
And so I just learned something. So that's pretty cool. What am I walking through?
The timeline.
Would you all do first, second, third?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. It was really just a lot of learning, and I guess real estate investing really quickly. I was just, again, obsessed with the idea of financial independence, obsessed with the idea of money working for me so that I didn't have to work for it. And that was essentially my goal. And I just figured out that it was actually a lot easier for me to pay off my debt, to give myself a raise, than it was for me to put myself through God knows what in order to get another job or to go back to school, etc. And so when I realized that, I became obsessed with keeping my costs low because it gave me a sense of freedom that I wanted. But with respect to real estate investing, that's essentially what I used that surplus for. And it was literally month by month, stacking and stacking until I could make that down payment. That took, I want to say, almost 2 years. And so I didn't know when we would get a bonus or when we wouldn't, but it was essentially me stacking and not touching it, not upgrading the house that we were in, which I could have done because I was more concerned with being able to pick up another property. The other reason for that was because I just knew, or I should say believed, that the market was just cyclical. And, coming out of 2008, the house that I was in completely plummeted, which was really, really difficult for me. But it didn't matter much because I was locked in a mortgage. On the investment side, that's a good thing because it means that prices are low. And so for me, I just knew that I had to pick up a property because I believed that it would increase in value. So all that to say, I learned a lot in a really short period of time. I stashed every nickel and dime over a long period of time and essentially bought my first investment property in 2014.
And just to clarify, I think that down payment was $18,000?
Something like that.
Yeah. So I think there's an idea when we say investment properties that people think they have to spend the same amount of money that they would on their primary residence.
Right.
And they're thinking, oh gosh, I must need $80,000 down payment. And that's not the case. Like when you're shopping for rental properties, it's very different than shopping for your primary mortgage. And I think that's an important thing to call out when people dismiss themselves as being interested in real estate. It may not take as much initial cash as you may think.
Yeah.
So to make sure we're clear, you all were in a residence, a home, but you all bought one that still gave you the flexibility to do other things financially. And so while you're in your home, you saved up money to put down on a separate investment property. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Okay. So at what point did this happen? Were you all doing this simultaneously as you were climbing out of debt, or did you all focus on the debt payoff first and then get the investment property?
Feels like it was kind of all at the same time, because we did a lot of different things. You know, she was paying down her debt, and then she moved in. And
yeah, you know what it was? We weren't living together when you bought the property because we weren't engaged.
Okay.
So we were still dating when he bought his property, and I had moved into my smaller apartment and was still actively working to pay down debt. And then he, at the same time, being debt free, started to save for the investment property.
Okay. So we're climbing out of debt. We're saving up for the investment property. Which property, because you said you paid off a mortgage, which property did you pay off of? And when did that become a goal to pay off the mortgage? Because that's a whole nother level.
It is. And that one didn't come until after we were married.
Yeah. So after we got married in 2015, the goal then became to pay off the property that we were in. It was also a little easier to do because the rental property was occupied. And so that was essentially, someone else was paying that mortgage for us, and we were getting some cash flow from that. It wasn't a lot, but we knew that over time that would build. And so we essentially, after you bought that property, you technically still have access or still have cash flow, right? Because you had that cash flow that you would have put towards the down payment. Well, now you still have that because we were both working. The shovel certainly got bigger after we got married. And so our goal became, let's go ahead and chop the mortgage off that we were in, knowing that we would convert this one that we're in to a second rental property.
Awesome. And so what is the long-term goal with you all? Because it seems like you kind of got the real estate bug. Is this something that you all will continue to do? Do you have other investment ambitions, or what's kind of some strategies that you want to do long-term? Because people are probably listening, taking notes, trying to think through how they can get rich and regular too.
Yeah. I think we're cool on the real estate bug for a little while. There's definitely some investment opportunities that we want to pursue. I think our base investment strategy will just be index funds, sort of your traditional stocks and bonds mix. But there are some other opportunities that we want to investigate, from franchising, a restaurant or a hotel or whatever opportunity there is, a shared workspace, to what else have we talked about?
Probably some things we can't talk about on this show. No, literally everything. The world is our oyster. I would say emerging markets, global business opportunities. Yeah. You really just want to sort of diversify essentially all of our business opportunities or investment opportunities.
Now, you mentioned index funds and index fund investing. I'm curious, as we're studying and learning about this whole other community that we somehow missed out on called FIRE. And the goal is to retire early, right?
Yes.
That's the R and the E in FIRE. Yes. So if you put a bunch of money in index funds, IRAs and things of that nature, the rules say you got to wait till 59 and a half to withdraw without taxes and all that. So how is it that you invest in these things and then get to a place where you can retire, but you're not 59 and a half? What's the thought process about then getting that money to live off on without the penalties?
Yeah, so there are tons of strategies. One of the most prominent ones is essentially the Roth conversion ladder. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in that at all because I'm really not reliant on it. This is essentially where real estate and the other businesses come in. And so I think you're alluding to the 4% rule, this concept of being able to withdraw 4% from a well-balanced portfolio, and essentially that money will never run out into perpetuity because the growth will always exceed what you are withdrawing plus inflation. That can get really complicated for those that are new to that concept. But again, that's not necessarily something that we're reliant on. We believe it's true, and it's something that we'll likely tap into, but we wouldn't have to withdraw 4% because our goal is to essentially create business opportunities that allow us to essentially fund our lifestyle.
And our withdrawals wouldn't necessarily come from our retirement accounts. So the 401ks and the IRAs are traditionally retirement accounts, but you can actually buy an index fund, buy stocks direct through a Vanguard or through, an Ally or one of these other platforms where it just becomes your portfolio and you take out money and put in money as you see fit. So that would be our approach. And to Julian's point, to keep that withdrawal low so the tax implications aren't terrible on us is really the goal.
Yeah. Julien, not too long ago, you made the comment, the world is our oyster. And that's a result of the decisions that you all have made over the years. And I believe that I read that you recently had a career change that you were able to make because of the choices that you and Kiersten have made up to this point. So what I want to know, or what I would like for you to expound upon, is the freedom that you gain. We talk about investing, we talk about saving, we talk about getting out of debt, and all that Ty and I keep beating this horse about is because we want more people to have more freedom. Talk about the freedom that you all have as a result of making these sacrifices over the years.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. Basically, about 2 months ago, I decided to walk away from my job, a really good job, good company, highly compensated, but I decided to walk away because it just wasn't worth it. It didn't feel right. It didn't sit well in my spirit. And I knew that it was having a negative impact on my health. It was having a negative impact on my home environment. And because we'd done the work financially to get us to a point where we had properties and we had enough money set aside, I was able to take that leap. And we had that conversation. We agreed that it was certainly worth it because what is the point of having all of this money if you can't use it? And I'm not saying that to say it as if like we are just rolling in cash,
we're not.
but because we're not, right? There's a reason why the rich is little and the regular is big.
We're more regular than rich.
We're more regular than rich. But we do think long term, right? And so that was really important. The other thing is we have an 18-month-old son. He's upstairs sleeping like a champ right now. And, it's our first child. And honestly, I don't know that I could look him in the face and tell him to stand up for what he believes in if I had reached this point in my career where I did not believe that what I was doing was the right thing for me and my family, but I did it anyway. And so I wanted to make sure that when he's old enough for me to have that conversation with him, I could say it and mean it. I didn't want to be able to tell him, well, this is what I did and you should do this, unlike what your father did. And so I really wanted to kind of break that, because that's the sort of advice that I've received throughout my life from older generations, and it's great. But I think it's more impactful when you don't have that sort of guilt, and you can just tell them, hey, you can stand up on your own too. And so I'm still going to do what I can. Kiersten's going to do what she can, and we're going to figure it all out. Right now, I'm focused primarily on the blog. She is still working. But to your point, I was able to walk away because of the work that we've done. And I'll say that's work that, we're talking 10, 15 years, right? So from college to undergrad to graduate school to paying off the car to getting around. I mean, it took a long time. This is not something that happened overnight. The decision happened quickly because I finally realized, I've been working really, really hard for a really long time. It should be okay for you to put your own well-being first. And so that's what I did. And you used the operative word, freedom. I don't know that I feel freedom yet because I'm a bit of a high achiever. And so I'm still striving to do a couple of things. But it certainly feels good to live on my own terms and to be in a position to put my family first, because I know that a lot of people don't have an opportunity to do that.
And just to clarify, because I do think there are multiple ways to skin a cat, and there's lots of ways to become rich. The work that we specifically did that enabled this change is that we built a life that didn't rely on both of our incomes. And so even if we never made any investments, never had any passive income, we lived on less than one person's check. And so if one person lost their check, we still had the other one and still had some cushion within that. And so that was the work that we did, is really trying to find the expenses that were meaningful to us, getting rid of all the, unnecessary overhead, getting rid of the debt. That took 10 or 15 years. It's not a short process. Well, not that long. It took 10 or 15 for you. It took a little shorter for me. But that's the work that we did. I don't want anybody to think like you got to go buy a bunch of real estate in order to leave a situation that is unhealthy.
No.
What you really need to do is manage your expenses, live good on the low, and then that becomes an option for you.
I literally almost shouted amen when you started saying that.
Yeah.
I wish more people would take that approach. We try to preach that pretty hard, especially when we do one-on-one coaching. And it's kind of a difficult concept for a lot of people to like even fathom in their mind. Like, how can we live on half? It's hard. Well, maybe you can live on 75, like just don't throw it out the window, because what you're doing is you're giving yourself the margin to make some different choices in life. And if you can start to build that muscle now, it'll get stronger, and you can move to 60, and then you can move to 50, and you'll be in a financial position of power, like is what you all are describing. So kudos to you all for making sacrifice after sacrifice and good decision after good decision to put yourself in this position of power where you're able to make these moves and start to build a life that you can be proud of, and that you can, like you talked about, Julien, you can look your son in the face and say, if you do some things right consistently over time, you can have the life that you want to have. If someone wants to learn more, to adopt this type of mentality, to adopt this type of knowledge about money, are there some books that you would throw out there as good starting points for people to check out?
I'm sure she has a different one, but I know one that sticks out, and I recommend it all the time. It's called The Wealth Choice.
Yes.
It's by Dr. Dennis Kimbrell.
Yeah. Changed my life.
He's
Professor at Clark Atlanta, right?
Professor at Clark Atlanta. I've had the chance to meet him in person at a conference a few years ago. He's a world-renowned scholar with respect to wealth building, particularly as it relates to the African American community. But I would absolutely say start there because it is very much about the mindset. And I think he does a great job in that book of helping people to sort of realize to Kiersten's earlier point, the idea of these everyday millionaires, because oftentimes people confuse rich and famous. They just assume that because somebody is famous that they must be rich, and that's not always the case, or the other way around, that in order to be rich, you have to be famous. And that's not true either. You can be rich and regular, right? You can just be a regular person. And that's exactly what we are striving for and wanting to help people tap into. And so you don't have to be a tech entrepreneur. You don't have to come up with this life-changing idea. You can literally just save your money, plant those seeds, let it grow, and it will work 24 hours a day. It will work around the clock, around the world, and ultimately it will end up working way harder than you will ever work.
Yeah, that's the book that changed my life. I had read a lot of the traditional financial books, from Rich Dad Poor Dad to Millionaire Next Door, all of your standard ones. But when I read The Wealth Choice, just his tone woke me up. He has a quote in there about saving, and it's something like, if you can't save 10%, then maybe the seeds of greatness just aren't in you. And it was like, wow, is it that simple? Like, if you have 90% to spend and you're still struggling with this 10%, then there's something that you need to look at inside of you to figure out, like, why is that the hard part? But the book is full of things like that. Like, That would be my favorite.
I'm glad you said that because you reminded me. That's a bold statement.
It is. I was offended, but then I was affected.
And it's a slap in the face.
Yeah.
But I do think, particularly with Black people, that's sort of what we need sometimes. Not to be insulting, but we are very bold and proud people.
Yeah.
You can't be subtle with Black people. Like, you gotta, and we knew, we wanted our message to grow. That's another reason why we called the blog Rich and Regular, because it couldn't be doing okay, and you know what I mean. Like, it had to be something that was like, whoa, like let me stop and think about that for a second if they're interested. And so I love that quote because he really struck at the heart at our hearts, and I'm sure at the hearts of anyone else that read that book.
If someone listening is unsure if they have what it takes to do what you've done, and they're not sure if they have the power to become rich and regular, what words of encouragement would you offer to them if you had a chance to talk to them one-on-one?
We have a lot of those conversations with a lot of people privately. You guys are much better at this, and have been doing coaching, I'm sure, and speaking with couples. For me, it's really just striking at the core. And we're a little different. I am a bit more of the smack in the face.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm not the person to talk to, people who are sort of soft spoken. And that's when I pull her and let her kind of massage the message into it. But I'll be honest with you, those are the conversations, and people that I've spoken with will tell you, I tell it like it is. And so I don't have any one particular word of encouragement, but for those people who need that slap in the face, it's get over it. Get over yourself. You can do this. If I can do it, you can absolutely do it. I'm no better or smarter than you are. If I can do it, you can do it. Get over yourself.
I am a little softer. I do think that it's a disservice. You're doing a disservice to yourself and to the world when you don't strive to make more money. Again, using money as a positive tool. It doesn't need to be make more money for you,
right,
but you can use that money to affect and create the change that you want to see in the world. And I do genuinely believe that everybody has been given unique gifts, and you just need to figure out how to exchange those gifts for money. And the prescribed path is really, really limiting. So as soon as you can get rid of the idea that you have to go through the prescribed path of education, 9 to 5, hustling for a weekend, and start to think, how can I make this money work harder for me? The quicker you can get off of that, what is it? Treadmill?
Hamster wheel.
Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking treadmill. The quicker you can get off that hamster wheel and start to use that money and repurpose that work into something greater.
Great advice. Now let everybody know about your website and how they can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, we're at www.richandregular.com. We're also on Instagram at Rich and Regular, Twitter at Rich and Regular, and we have a Facebook page as well. And we're in Atlanta, so if anyone's ever in Atlanta.
Everybody's in Atlanta.
I know. Anyone who's not in Atlanta, if you have a layover in Atlanta.
Call her, don't call me.
I can't pick you up from the airport. Don't call me.
Julien and Kiersten, this has been great. Fantastic advice, and your story has been super inspirational. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share it with our audience today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.